Today we will continue with the examination of vitals. Last class we have discussed pulse. Today we are going to discuss respiration, blood pressure, temperature. First about the respiration. Respiration is finely tuned to maintain the milieu interior of the body constant through the action of chemoreceptors acting on the brainstem respiratory center, which in turn controlling the working respiratory muscle, and that will modulate that alveolar ventilation rate as well as depth, so that the patient will be able to maintain a normal pH, partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of carbon dioxide. This diagram is showing the basic schematic of the respiratory control feedback loop. As mentioned earlier, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and partial pressure of oxygen and pH, they modulate the central as well as peripheral chemoreceptor activity, and these impulses will be taken to the brainstem respiratory center, and which in turn again control the respiratory muscle by the breathing and modulating the rate and depth of alveolar ventilation, so that the homeostasis of partial pressure of carbon dioxide and partial pressure of oxygen, blood pH will be maintained constant. This slide shows the various brainstem respiratory centers. First one, it is the DRG, that is the dorsal respiratory group of neurons, that is known to act as inspiratory center. Next one is the VRG, that is ventral respiratory group of neurons, and that is really the expiratory center, and the chemoreceptor take that impulses to the DRG, and the chemoreceptor, central chemoreceptor in this diagram is represented as CCR. Next one is the pneumotactic center, that is known to control that dorsal respiratory group of neuron as well as ventral respiratory group of neuron, and the pneumotactic center is known to make the respiratory center there in the medulla. The pneumotactic center is known to smoothen the function of that medullary respiratory center. The pneumotactic center is there in the upper part of the bones. Somewhere there in the lower part of the bone, you get the apneustic center, and these are the respiratory center mainly concerned with respiration. Moreover, respiration is a voluntary as well as involuntary process, and therefore since it is voluntary, there will be control mechanism that is coming through the motor cortex, and respiration is known to vary with emotional state. Therefore, it is also having a link to the limbic system. But these are the pathway that is coming above the level of pons and modulating the centers in the brainstem. components of the respiration. That is, when you are commenting on the respiration, you have to mention the rate of respiration. That is, when you have to mention the rhythm of respiration, that is, the respiration regular or not. Next, you have to mention the depth of respiration, and you have to mention next it is the type of respiration or pattern of respiration, and you have to mention whether the accessory muscles are in action or not, and lastly you have to mention whether there is any abnormal sound heard during breathing. This is the way examine the respiration. You have to palpate the radial pulse with the right hand, and the patient will think that you are still examining the pulse of the patient, and therefore she may not be aware of the respiration, and therefore the respiration will become regular. And the left hand you have to place it over the abdomen and not the rise and fall. And the rise and fall constitute that one cycle of respiration. You count the rate of rise of the abdomen. That will give you an idea about the rate of respiration. The documentation of respiration is very important. First, you have to write the whole respiration like this. Respiration is 12 per minute regular, nominal and depth, abdominothoracic in male or thoracoabdominal in female, and there is no action of accessory muscles of respiration, or you have to say that the patient is not dyspneic, and finally you have to say that there is no noise on breathing. Eupnea is the normal breathing and includes a normal respiratory rate of 12 to 20 breaths per minute. The pattern, depth and rhythm are normal, as you can see there in the waves going up and down at a normal rate, and this is what is called eupnea. The normal rate you can say from 12 to 20 cycles per minute, and see in eupnea you have to say in normal rate, rhythm, depth and pattern. And tachypnea means the rate more than 20 per minute, that is seen in exercise, fever, pain, hypoxia and CNS diseases. Bradypnea means the rate less than 20 per minute, and that you can see physiologically during sleep, and also in alcoholic patients and drug overdosages and CNS diseases. Apnea, prolonged cessation of breathing. It is what is called apnea, and it can be seen in opioid toxicity, head trauma and stroke. And variation of further again the variation of the respiratory rate, tachypnea condition the rate more than 20 is seen in exertion, anxiety, COPD, asthma, pneumothorax, pneumonia, pleurisy, pulmonary embolism, left ventricular failure, interstitial lung disease and respiratory muscle paralysis, as in the case of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Bradypnea rate less than 20 at less than 12 per minute, and that is seen in hypothermia, hypothyroidism, drug induced like narcotics, benzodiazepine, barbiturate, alcohol, and increased intracranial tension. Next, you have to say that respiration is regular or not. That is what is called the rhythm of respiration. And say respiration is not as regular as the pulse of the individual, because respiration is having dual control. One is the voluntary and the other one is the involuntary control. And see, but when the respiration is markedly irregular, I have to say respiration is markedly irregular, and see whether there is any pattern for that irregularity. The pattern respiration, that is known as periodic respiration. Next one is the depth of respiration. But this is by noting the movement of abdomen and expansion of the chest. And eupnea, there will be normal depth and rate, and usually by noting the chest expansion, the chest expansion in normal respiration is to the tune of 4 to 8 centimeters. When the depth of respiration is small, then we have to say that respiration is very shallow. This will be there in painful condition involving the pleura or chest wall, and the shallow respiration can be there without pain when the patient is having peripheral respiratory musculature failure like Guillain-Barré syndrome, snake bite poisoning, or organophosphorus compound poisoning, myasthenia gravis, and myopathy. And shallow breathing is also very characteristic there in restrictive lung diseases. The respiration become markedly deep and irregular in hysterical hyperventilation, and regular deep respiration we get in metabolic abnormality like metabolic acidosis, and regular rapid breathing also can be there when there is a brainstem disease producing what is called central neurogenic hyperventilation. Deep respiration sometimes can be seen in poisoning like salicylate poisoning. Best method to assess the depth of the respiration we have already mentioned by noting the chest expansion, and it is 5 to 8 centimeters. Next one is the type of breathing. In children it will be abdominal, and abdominal or abdominothoracic in male, thoraco-abdominal in female because of the prominent internal intercostal muscle activity. Inspiratory prolongation that you get when there is an upper airway obstruction, and expiratory prolongation is usually seen bronchopulmonary diseases like asthma and COPD. Next abnormal breathing is the mouth breathing, and again that is also seen in upper airway. See, when there is a blockade there in the nose or nasopharynx. Pursed-lip breathing, it is seen in COPD patients, and pursed-lip breathing is the application of what is called auto PEEP. Next is the paradoxical respiration, where it is seen in bilateral diaphragmatic paralysis, and you get what is called paradoxical abdominal respiration. And when there is fatigability of the intercostal muscle, you may get paradoxical thoracic respiration, where instead of moving the thoracic cage out during inspiration, there will be collapse of that lower intercostal space during inspiration, and that is what is called paradoxical thoracic respiration. Seesaw respiration is seen when there is a unilateral diaphragmatic paralysis, and it can be studied by keeping a pen or a pencil across the midline over the abdomen. Next, when there is multiple fracture rib, as in road traffic accident, you get fractured portion is known to move in and out during respiration, and that is what is called stopping chest. Types of breathing: pathological condition known to produce difference there in the type of breathing are purely thoracic breathing, peritonitis, pregnancy, ascites, and large ovarian mass. The abdominal movement will be somewhat absent, and the respiratory movement mainly seen there in the thorax. Purely abdominal, when there is pleuritic chest pain and when the patient is having chest wall injury and respiratory muscle weakness, as in the case of Guillain-Barré syndrome, myasthenia, and muscular dystrophy, you get purely abdominal respiration. Next condition known to produce a purely abdominal respiration is ankylosis spondylosis, and therefore there will be fixation of the thoracic cage, and whatever respiration that you can see only in the form of abdominal movement. See, during normal respiration, there will be up forward movement of abdomen as well as outward movement of thoracic cage. Instead of that, if you are getting a reversal of movement there in the abdomen, that is the paradoxical abdominal respiration, reverse movement there in the lower part of the thorax, I have to say that there is paradoxical thoracic respiration. Other paradoxical movement that you can see there in the supraclavicular and the suprasternal area are abnormal retraction, the suprasternal and supraclavicular area, and intercostal space retraction will be seen in upper airway obstruction, and there can be substernal retraction and subcostal retraction when there is weakness of the lower part of the intercostal muscle, and this is what is called the Hoover's sign, and producing what is called thoracic paradoxical respiration. Now we have to see the accessory muscles of respiration are in action or not. Normal muscles of respiration are diaphragmatic plus external intercostal. They accomplish that inspiration, but normally the expiration is a passive process, and there is no artery contraction of the muscle during expiration, normal expiration. The inspiratory muscles, accessory muscles of respiration are Elaenaceae, scalenus anterior, sternocleidomastoid, trapezius, pectoralis, and serratus anterior. The accessory expiratory muscles are orbicularis, oris, producing pursed lip breathing, and that is giving you what is called positive and expiratory pressure. Next one in the intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscle, abdominal muscles, quadratus lumboris, latissimus dorsi. And the breathing related common terms that we have already discussed, eupnea, dyspnea, tachypnea, bradypnea, apnea, and hyperpnea means there is an increase in the rate and depth of respiration, and that is seen in metabolic encephalopathy like metabolic acidosis, and also in central neurogenic hyperventilation, as in the case of some of the CNS diseases. Next, when the respiration is irregular, you have to see whether there is any pattern for that irregular respiration, and that is known as periodic breathing. Important periodic breathing are Cheyne-Stokes respiration, Byers breathing, ataxic breathing, apneustic breathing, Kussmaul's breathing, central neurogenic hyperventilation, and gasping. Cheyne-Stokes breathing may be seen during sleep, infants, heart, liver, kidney failures, severe pneumonia, increased intracranial tension, and narcotic poisoning. Kussmaul's breathing or acidotic breathing, this is otherwise known as deep sighing or hissing respiration, seen in diabetic ketoacidosis, type 2 respiratory failure, kidney liver failure, and drug toxicity, especially that salicylic acid toxicity. Now, we should remember some of the terminal respiratory response. They are the Byers breathing. Byers breathing means respiration comes in double, triples, and quadruples between prolonged period of apnea. Ataxic breathing, it is highly irregular in rate and depth, and see again indicative of a brainstem disease. Apneustic breathing, that is cessation of breathing at the height of inspiration, that is seen in the Fontaine diseases, and central neurogenic hyperventilation, that is the deep regular breathing, and the patient will be usually unconscious due to brainstem diseases. Next one, it is the gasping, and finally the death rattle. Gasping, that is the jaw breathing, the mouth breathing by falling of the jaw and arching of the neck backward, and apparently great respiratory effort, but airflow will be very poor. This slide shows the different types of periodic breathing. That is we have mentioned that apneustic breathing, that is the cessation of respiration at the height of inspiration, and it is known to come like that. It is what is called apneustic breathing. Then Cheyne breathing, the waxing or waning of respiration in between apnea, and the duration of each cycle is usually 2 to 2.5 minutes, and the duration of apnea is usually half a minute. Then ataxic breathing, it is usually the depth and rate will be markedly varying. That is seen again in brainstem disease, especially medullary diseases. Byers breathing means the respiration is known to come in bursts, that is, respiration is known to come in doubles, triples, and quadruples in between prolonged period of apnea. This is also a terminal respiratory response and often known as agonal respiration. Kussmaul's breathing, the rate as well as that depth of respiration will be markedly varying. That is usually seen in acidosis. The same will be the pattern in nervous system diseases, and then it is what is called central neurogenic hyperventilation. It will be just similar to Kussmaul's breathing, but patient will not have any acidosis. Lastly, it is the Fontaine curse, where the disease is at the cervicomedullary junction, where the patient may not be able to take breathing during sleep. Again, this slide again depicts the different types of periodic breathing, and with this aspect we have already described the site of lesion, ataxic breathing there in the medulla, cluster breathing lower pons, higher medulla, and that is known to produce the Bayer's respiration. And apneustic breathing, the lesion is the mid and lower pons. Central neurogenic hyperventilation, the lesion usually will be there in the lower midbrain and upper pons. Next is the change-rose respiration. The cause may be there in the cerebral hemisphere, midbrain or upper pons. Then lastly, we have to comment on whether there is any abnormal sound during breathing. Normally there will not be any abnormal sound. Usual abnormal sound heard during breathing are wheezing, there is in smaller airway obstruction, stridor in upper airway obstruction, snoring physiological or sometimes physiological during sleep, but it will be very conspicuous in obstructive sleep apnea. Stertorous breathing usually seen in comatose patient. This is due to the falling of tongue back to the throat. And next is the sighing respiration, frequent sighing. That's a feature of anxiety. And it is a cogwheel respiration, that is the frequent interruption of respiration, again seen in anxiety. Grunting or labored breathing, that is the forceful expiration, and usually seen in heavy exercises as well as in lower respiratory obstruction. Hissing respiration, that is seen in Kussmaul's breathing, and the death rattle that you can see just prior to the death of the individual. Death rattle is a distinctive sound that a person may make as they are coming to the end of their life, and may be no longer and may not. In death rattle, the death rattle is a distinctive sound that a person may make as they are reaching the terminal phase. In this phase, the patient cannot swallow or cannot clear the throat, and the air is known to gurgle through the fluid collected there in the throat, producing the peculiar sound, namely the death rattle. But this patient may not be showing much distress out of it, and they may not show any signs of pain too. That is the general feature of the death rattle. The breathing may be highly irregular in some instances, and the noise of breathing also may be highly irregular. Next topic is the third vitals, namely the blood pressure. The method of examination of the blood pressure we have already discussed there in part 1 general examination, and please refer again back to the part 1 respiration. Please again refer back to general examination part 1 to get familiar with the measurement of blood pressure. Different types of different methods of taking blood pressures are sphygmometer method, aneroid blood pressure measurement, semi-automated blood pressure measurement, direct arterial blood pressure measurement. Blood pressure systole, it is 90 to 120 millimeters of mercury, diastole 60 to 80 millimeters of mercury, pulse pressure 20 to 40 millimeters of mercury. and the mean arterial blood pressure, and that is actually the driving force there in the vasculature, driving blood from one point to the other, is that you have to calculate indirectly from this formula. Mean arterial blood pressure is the diastolic blood pressure plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure. Next one is the ambulatory blood pressure measurement, home blood pressure measurement, and usually these two values are lesser than 12/7 than the clinic blood pressure. The ambulatory blood pressure or home blood pressure measurement normal is 135/85 millimeters of mercury. Documentation of blood pressure is also important, and in adult patients, if you are getting normal blood pressure, you have to write the blood pressure like this. Blood pressure is 120/80 millimeters of mercury in the right upper limb in the supine position. With the adult cuff, the patient is not on any antihypertensive medication. If the patient is using antihypertensive medication, I have to mention what all antihypertensive medicine taking when you are giving the blood pressure. This chart shows the different levels of blood pressure according to the British Hypertensive Society, World Health Organization, and International Society for Hypertension. Here, the optimal blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, is less than 120, and the optimal diastolic blood pressure is less than 80 millimeters of mercury. Normal systolic less than 130 and diastolic less, say, 85. High normal blood pressure, it is higher than 130, but let's say higher than 130 to 139, and high normal diastolic blood pressure is higher than 85 to 89 millimeters of mercury. Hypertension grade 1, that is mild hypertension, systolic blood pressure is 140 to 159, and the diastolic 90 to 99. Grade 2 or moderate hypertension, it is 160 to 179, and the diastolic 100 to 109 millimeters of mercury. Grade 3 hypertension, that is the severe hypertension, the systolic blood pressure more than 180 millimeters of mercury, and the diastolic blood pressure more than 110. Isolated systolic hypertension, grade 1, the systolic will be 140 to 159, and the diastolic always less than 90. Grade 2 isolated systolic hypertension, the systolic blood pressure is at or above 160 millimeters of mercury, the diastolic again below 90 millimeters of mercury. And this may be somewhat confusing to this patient, but we should know the other classification of blood pressure too, according to the American Heart Association and American College of Cardiology. The blood pressure, normal blood pressure, systolic less than 120, diastolic less than 80, elevated blood pressure, that the systolic value between 120 to 129, diastolic again less than 80. Hypertension stage 1, 130 to 139 systolic, and diastolic 80 to 89. Hypertension stage 2, systolic value more than 140 millimeters of mercury, and diastolic more than 90. Isolated systolic hypertension, systolic blood pressure value at or above 130 millimeters of mercury, and but diastole less than 80, and isolated diastolic blood pressure where the systolic blood pressure less than 130 and the diastolic blood pressure at or above 80 millimeters of mercury. Mixed systolic diastolic blood pressure, meaning the systolic blood pressure at or above 130 and the diastolic blood pressure at or above 80 millimeters of mercury. If there is a disparity in the category between systolic and diastolic pressure, the higher value determines the stage of blood pressure. Now we shall see the different types of hypertension. Primary hypertension means there is no cause for systemic hypertension obvious on physical examination and investigation. Secondary hypertension means there is a known cause for the production of hypertension. Causes of secondary hypertension. Important causes are alcoholism, obesity, pregnancy, renal diseases, endocrine diseases, drugs, coarctation of aorta. The renal-endocrine causes for secondary hypertension are the renal parenchymal disease, particularly glomerulonephritis, renovascular or arteriovenous, next adult polycystic kidney diseases. Endocrine causes are pheochromocytoma, Cushing syndrome, primary aldosteronism or Conn's disease. Next one is the glucocorticoid suppressible hyperaldosteronism, hyperparathyroidism and acromegaly. Primary hypothyroidism, thyrotoxicosis, congenital adrenal hyperplasia due to 11 beta hydroxylase or 17 alpha hydroxylase deficiency, Liddle syndrome, 11 beta hydroxy thyroid dehydrogenase deficiency. These are no other endocrine causes for systemic hypertension. And now we have to see what is the goal blood pressure when you are treating hypertensive individuals. And the goal blood pressure in an individual less than 80 years of age, the goal blood pressure is less than 140 over 90 millimeters of mercury, or blood pressure value less than 135 over 85 ambulatory blood pressure or home blood pressure monitor, blood pressure value. When in individuals more than 80 years of age, blood pressure value less than 150 over 90 or a blood pressure value 140 over 80 millimeters of mercury, ambulatory blood pressure measurement or home blood pressure measurement. Other terms related to hypertension, it is the auscultative graph, that is in severe systemic hypertension, very high diastolic blood pressure on casual recording, but when you are carefully bringing down the blood pressure, again coracosound appears and disappears with the disappearance of coracosound. Next is the paroxysmal hypertension, that the usually seen following the withdrawal of antihypertensive drugs, that is otherwise known as rebound hypertension, seen when the clonidine, levodopa, beta blocker are withdrawn abruptly. Paroxysmal hypertension is also seen in pheochromocytoma 2. Paradoxical hypertension is the hypotensive induced hypertension. Usually beta blockers, AC inhibitors or ARB. Beta blocker bringing this phenomenon is seen in pheochromocytoma, and ACE and the ARB administration producing a profound rise in blood pressure is a point in favor of occlusive renal artery diseases. Double hypertension means at times blood pressure may go and at times it may come down to the rock bottom, and such type of labile hypertension is seen in Guillain-Barré syndrome and also acute intermittent porphyria. Marked hypertension means usually the blood pressure there in the clinics will be normal, but blood pressure recorded at home will be higher. Initially it was considered as benign, but now it is not a benign condition. The chance of development of systemic hypertension is very high in this group too. Next one, it is the white coat hypertension, where the home blood pressure value will be usually considerably less than the blood pressure recorded at the clinics of the doctor. Pseudo hypertension means in the case of thickened arteries, we have to apply more and more inflation of BP cuff to occlude the blood pressure, and this is known to produce a erroneous high blood pressure, and it is not at all reflecting the arterial blood pressure, and is known as pseudo hypertension. Accelerated hypertension means when there is a substantial rise of blood pressure from the basal value, it is known as accelerated hypertension. Hypertensive emergency means a sudden increase in blood pressure with a target organ damage, and that is the hypertensive emergency. Usually you may get papilledema in this condition. Hypertensive urgencies are high blood pressure with very high risk for target organ damage, but yet to develop it is the hypertensive urgencies. Some practical points: blood pressure on repeat recording in the same limb may not be the same. Variation less than 10 by 5 millimeters of mercury between both upper limbs or lower limbs is considered as normal. A difference more than 10 by 5 millimeters of mercury between upper limbs or between lower limbs are considered as abnormal, and to look for evidence, look for obstruction down the side where you are getting low blood pressure. Blood pressure will be 10 to 20 millimeters of higher there in the lower limb, even in the lying down position. Blood pressure will be more in the standing position and will be so in primary hypertension. Standing blood pressure will be lower in secondary hypertension. Asymmetry of pulse is the indication to make the blood pressure in all limbs. Other usefulness of taking blood pressure is by look for what is called hillside. That is, the blood pressure there in the lower limb is 40 to 60 millimeters of mercury than in the upper limb. That is known as hillside and usually seen in aortic regurgitation. Next is the rollover test, where the difference in blood pressure from the left lateral to the supine position in a pregnant lady is usually more than 20 millimeters of mercury. Then you have to say the rollover test is positive. inflation of the BP curve may be used in letting out blood. Then you can use the BP apparatus to see whether the Hess test or tourniquet test or capillary fragility test is normal. Blood pressure, where you have to maintain the blood pressure between systolic and diastolic blood pressure for 5 minutes and deflate and wait for 2 minutes. Then afterward, you have to check the forearm for petechia. See where you are getting the petechia maximally distributed below the elbow crease and note how much petechia you can count in 1 square centimeter area. If the number is more than 10, it is considered as positive. Blood pressure measurement can be used in the case of hypocalcemia, where you have to check the Tausig sign. When you are inflating the BP curve above systolic level and keeping the pressure elevated for 2 minutes, note the position of the hand, and it is occurring what is called Akauchi's hand. That's a point in favor of hypocalcemia. Akauchi's hand means there will be crowding of fingers and thumb, pulses paradoxus and pulses alternate that we have already discussed. Hypotension means blood pressure less than 90/60 millimeters of mercury, and usually this is what is called shock. Posture hypertension on standing, that is a far more than 20 millimeters of mercury is, or a diastole far more than 10 millimeters of mercury is a point in favor of posture hypotension. Fourth vital is the temperature. Method of examination of measuring temperature that we have already discussed there in general examination part 1. We have to see the diurnal variation of temperature, that is known as circadian rhythm, where the temperature is known to vary 0.5 to 1 degree centigrade, and the thermoregulation is the function of the hypothalamus. Thermoregulation is due to the interaction of hypothalamus set point heat generation to reach the temperature to the set point and heat dissipating mechanism to prevent overshoot of temperature above the set point. A nice balancing of this is known to produce a constant body temperature. Temperature will be lowest at 6 am and highest at 4 to 6 pm in normal temperature. Normal temperature, it is 37 to 38 degrees centigrade or 98.6 to 100.4 degree Fahrenheit. But you have to give importance to any value, any mild rise in temperature, even in this range. From the normal known Baseline value, you have to view it suspiciously. And the grandmother's method to look for fever is by seeing whether the patient is febrile to touch, and for that you have to keep your forearm on the forehead of the patient or side of the neck below the jaw on it, and they usually put the hand in armpit and groin in the case in children. Different types of thermometers are: one is the clinical mercury thermometer and special rectal thermometer. This is important, otherwise we will miss the hypothermia. Infrared tympanic thermometer, liquid crystal forehead temperature strip, invasive temperature sensitive like esophageal temperature recording. This is the different levels of temperature, and the pyrogen is known to elevate the set point in the hypothalamus, and therefore the heat generating mechanism will produce more heat, and to reach that newly high set point, and therefore the body may feel hot, and this is what is called fever. Normal temperature we already discussed. Mild or low grade temperature, it is 38 to 39 degree, and a value more than 100 to 102 degree Fahrenheit. Moderate fever is more than 39 to 40 degree centigrade, more than 102 to 104 degree Fahrenheit. High grade more than 40 to 41 degree centigrade, and more than 104 to 104 to 106 degree Fahrenheit. Hyperpyrexia means more than 41 degree centigrade or more than 106 degree Fahrenheit. Disorders of increased body temperature. One is the hyperpyrexia, where there is a increased hypothalamic set point, and therefore the patient will develop a very high body temperature. This is known to occur in spontaneous hemorrhage, cerebral malaria, rheumatic fever, serotonin syndrome, and thyroid storm. Hyperthermia, normal set point, failure of the thermo regulation, normal set point but failure of thermo regulation, that is known to occur with changes in the environmental temperature. Heat stroke, there are two types of heat stroke, exertion and non-exertion, where again the thermal set point is normal, but there will be paralysis of heat losing mechanism. And next one, such an individual, and usually it is seen when the individual is working in hot, humid conditions. Malignant hyperthermia means there will be a inherited sacroplasmic reticulum abnormality, and following exposure to halothane or succinylcholine, there will be very high increase in the body temperature, that is known to coagulate the body protein. Neuroleptic malignant syndrome, that is not inherited, and it will be associated with the rigidity, and that is seen in patients taking antipsychotic drugs, phenothiazine, haloperidol, prochlorperazine, metoclopramide are known to produce neuroleptic malignant syndrome. Next, we have to see what is the duration of the fever. Short febrile illness means 7 to 10 days duration. Prolonged fever, a duration 10 to 14 days. Chronic fever, a duration more than this. And we have to again know what is meant by parexia of unknown origin or fever of unknown origin. Fever higher than 38.3 degrees centigrade or several occasions. Duration of fever more than at least 3 weeks, and uncertain diagnosis even after 1 week of study there in the hospital. And next, when you are noting that temperature chart, you can see a pattern of fever, and according to the pattern we have to classify fever as continuous fever, remittent fever, intermittent fever, quotidian fever, tertian fever, and quartan fever. Continuous fever means there will be round the clock the fever more than 24 hours, and the temperature will not fluctuate more than 1 degree centigrade. Remittent fever means the patient will be febrile throughout the day, but variation of temperature will be usually more than 1 degree. Usually it is more than 2 degree. Intermittent fever means during 24 hours there will be febrile and afebrile periods. Quotidian fever means daily there will be a fever spike, and that daily fever is usually seen in falciparum malaria. Tertian fever means or alternate days the patient will get fever, that is the tertian fever, usually seen in vivax malaria or malaria ovale. Quartan fever, it is every fourth day when the fever is coming, that is the quartan fever, and this type of fever is very rare and seen in falciparum malaria or malaria infection. Fever and associated symptom also we have to ask for and look for, that is the cold intolerance, chills, rigor, delirium, seizure, sweating. And fever is having a cold face and a hot face, and cold, chills, rigor, you get the cold phase of fever, and sweating is seen in the sweating phase of fever. And when the fever is very high, we get confusion state in extremes of age, that is in children and elderly. And when the fever is very high, it may throw seizure, as in the case of febrile fit, or as in the case of fever associated with hyperpyrexia in adult. And you have to see fever associated signs. They are the tachycardia, relative bradycardia, coating of tongue, parching of lip, herpes simplex lesion, miliaria crystallina, dehydration. The relative bradycardia means for every 1 degree rise in temperature, there should be a rise of 10 beats there in the pulse rate. When this much proportionate increase is not there in a febrile patient, you have to say the patient is having relative bradycardia. Parching of lip is the dry cracked lip seen in patient who is having a high grade fever for days together. Miliaria crystallina, that is due to the hydropic degeneration of the sweat duct. There will be retention of that sweat and producing fine granular appearance of the skin, just like prickly heat like appearance, and this is what is called miliaria crystallina. And dehydration is very common in high grade fever, that you can see with the signs of dehydration. Now we have to discuss hypothermia. It is usually failure of the thermoregulatory mechanism, and the body temperature is far below the metabolic need of the body. That is usually body temperature less than 35 degrees centigrade or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Causes are the hypothermia can be due to decreased heat production, and that such things are seen there in hypopituitarism, hypoadrenalism, hypothyroidism. And increased heat loss can be the cause for sometimes that hypothermia, as in the case of exposure to very cold environment, burns and cold infusion of fluid. And impaired thermoregulation, that may be the cause for this sometimes that hypothermia, as in the case of head injury, stroke, or intracranial bleed, CNS tumor, multiple sclerosis. The miscellaneous cause producing hypothermia are sepsis, polytrauma, uremia, prolonged cardiac arrest. Now a word about the TPR chart. The ratio between respiration pulse is 1:4. For every 1 degree rise in temperature, there will be a 10 beat rise in pulse or heartbeat. For 1 degree rise in temperature, there will be 2.5 cycle increase in respiratory rate. All these parameters recording should be during a sitting, and all these parameters recording during a sitting is known as TPR chart. And we have to record as and when we are noting the temperature of the individual, we have to record all other two parameters as well. Relative bradycardia is seen in typhoid fever and viral fever. Relative tachycardia is seen it is not relative tachycardia, it is relative tachypnea is seen in pneumonia. Therefore, we have completed the general examination, and thank you for listening.